So, belt system. So, the Jiu-Jitsu belt system is derived from the Judo belt system. The Judo belt system was created by Kano Sensei to further organize Judo as a sport for everybody to practice in. And I think prior to Kano, there was white belt and black belt. That's all there was. And it was just, you got a white belt when you started. At some point, you ended up being a black belt. I don't think there was any formality to it. Maybe that was kind of similar to the way wrestling is now. Like, there isn't even, I don't think it was, back then, I don't think it really meant what we think it means.
Yeah, I think, like everything, over time it changes. And the meanings of things change over time. And the memes change over time. And in my fantasy, which I know isn't real, is that you begin with a crisp, clean, herringbone weave white belt. And then that belt, because you don't wash it, over the months and years becomes brown, or dirty. That's the brown belt. And then when you're awarded a black belt, that belt is washed, and then a black swath is sewn over the belt. And then as that belt wears, the white belt begins to come back through. And that is a lifetime on the mats. And you can't speed it up. You can't slow it down. That, to me, is the perfect, pure metaphor. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's the way I like to believe it's true. I think as a story, it's a great story. But then I've heard the reality of it is they added the other belts because the American mind, the Western mind, can't handle the delayed gratification of doing something 5 years without a promotion. So when you add the other belts, then the goals are sooner and quicker. And then you create a goal system, which to me is antithetical to the reality of it, is that you train because you love training and can't not train. And then if you want to rationalize it, you say, well, we have to organize it for a competition. Otherwise, no one really skilled guys will compete against unskilled guys. And then they created that. But that seems to have worked itself out fine in wrestling, boxing, Muay Thai without any belts. But that's like, and I'm not saying the belts are bad. I kind of like them. But I can also see, like everything, I'm a Hegelian, there's a good and a bad.
Yeah.
Did Jiu-Jitsu always have blue, purple, brown, and black? Did
When
it
I started,
always have
it
that?
did.
But I mean, like from its inception, or nobody knows.
No.
That's a question for the audience.
Yes.
Not that
Does
I'm aware
anyone know?
There are already people raising their hands. I know. I read Opening the Closed Guard. I know.
Put that in the chat.
Halio's
Chat it up.
book. Yeah, I've heard several little stories in passing from some of my black belts who have read all those books, and I don't want to say anything because I know it wouldn't be factually correct. But I heard like Halio introduced the blue belt to the jiu-jitsu.
But there was,
I
what
don't know.
about a purple and a brown belt?
I have no idea.
Nobody knows right now. Nobody here knows, but somebody in the world probably knows.
A bunch of people who practice this art for sure know.
So I was doing my research, and one interesting thing I came across was that, so Kano Sensei died at 10th Dan, which is 10th degree black belt. But they have a theoretical 11th, 12th, and 13th that you can get that no one's ever gotten to, but they have it there because they just, like, you can continue to practice. And
it's kind of cool having it out there in the ether.
Well, and it's white. It's white, black, or coral is the belt you can wear if you get there. So it's the return to white belt beyond Kano Sensei.
I like it.
Which is interesting. Yeah, and I don't know where the colored belts even came from.
Well, let's just ask. All right, so what does the belt represent? Let's first begin with just the white and the black belt. The black belt theoretically represents a mastery of the fundamentals of the art. That's the art part. The sport part, it represents you are skilled enough to compete and hold your own with other black belts within your peer group. Peer group being age, sex,
Wait.
what's the other one? Weight class, right? And then in the street, it's just means that you are now self-defense capable to protect yourself against the average attacker in the street, which is the whole more mythical, weird part of what we practice, right? Is that whole like, who are we practicing this art before? What is the purpose? And to me, when I ask myself, my primal purpose, my reptilian brain is practicing it so I can protect myself against a theoretical life or limb attack. But that's not why my midbrain or my forebrain loves a jiu-jitsu. And I like to separate those. Like the artsy part.
But everybody's might be different too.
Right.
Like my reptilian brain, I think, likes to let out aggression on the mat. I'm not thinking about somebody attacking me. I don't feel like I've ever once
I don't think you have.
thought about that for training purposes. Mine's about, I have this angst and this inner like attacker.
You're the attacker.
I gotta let my attack out on Tobin.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
And then my more logical side, is that
Yeah.
what you call it, or whatever,
Yep.
is
Executive
about
functioning side.
the executive functioning is about, community, helping others, mental health and well-being in general for me and for my friends, learning, exercise, lots of things. Rarely is it self-defense though. I don't.
No. You tend to not think a street very often.
No, I think street a lot. That's not my why.
Oh, okay. That makes
And
sense.
I feel like you always kind of exemplified that that's not why we do this.
Yes, it's not
Like
why
that's
you do
the
it.
way that I was coached, is that this isn't about self-defense.
Yep, I agree still. Even though, even
How you
though
like that?
that's its origins.
Yeah.
Because if the
Even
why,
though it's a result, it's
a
not the
result.
reason.
Yes.
Self-defense is the result of training martial arts, not necessarily the reason.
That was another thing that I was reading, because I looked up. So basically, I looked up Hixon's system too, because Jiu-Jitsu Global Federation has its own standards and qualifications for these different belt rankings. And when they get to black belt, they talk about it as a result. They're like, this isn't an achievement. It's not. They're like, this is a result. Like you end up having these like milestones, and then you get to brown belt, and then the black belt's a result of what happens during your brown belt. I thought that was
100%. Yeah.
the verbiage like changes. You read through it. It's like you get this for this milestone, this for this milestone. This one's a result.
Well, I like to think of it as all a result. And if I'm evaluating somebody for a belt, as a result of being able to hold your base, recover your guard, and perform certain techniques, you are now a blue belt.
Yep.
Like it's not, I mean.
Even
Yeah,
if
that's what I
you're super strong, super fit, if you don't know that much of the art, you're still not a blue belt. And like I remember one of my first purple belt I ever gave, I was told by John Machado, oh, you gave him his belt way too early. And I'm like, why? He like holds his own against the brown belts. And he explained, it's not about that. It's about his personal potential. And just because he's this really agile athlete and can beat the upper belts doesn't mean knowledge-wise. And I remember him explaining, Chris, you almost have to imagine if he had the flu and was very weak, could he still perform the way he is? And I think, no, he couldn't. And it's like, that's the belt.
Oh, interesting.
Is when you remove the athletics and attributes, can you still perform the art? And then it also means that anyone can achieve a black belt. Whereas the way he came up, really only the tough athletes could.
Is that how it was back then?
That's kind of like when I came in, it was in the shift where quote unquote non-athletes could start to attain higher belts.
But it was interesting because we, on one episode that we had recently where we were talking about the Dirty 13, you talked about somebody who was given their black belt that wasn't one of the athletes.
That's right.
That didn't make the Dirty Dozen.
And for some reason, he didn't count because he was 78 years old, and it was like a token old guy black belt.
So he doesn't count.
So it doesn't count?
That's weird.
Is that weird?
So super weird.
I think it's weird.
Yeah.
Myths are created. And in the age of the internet, a lie, if repeated 10,000 times, then 100 becomes the truth.
Yeah.
And that's like why most historians and philosophers now say we are in the post-truth era, and which is post-modern. And so modernism, with the age of enlightenment and all that, was reason over religion, reason over magical thinking. Then going through modernism, it's almost a return to non-objective truth, that everything's a truth if you believe it's true. Power of positive thinking. There's a whole new age left-wing version of that, a right-wing. That's post-modernism, post-truth. Whereas what matters is the myth, the narrative, the story, which in some ways is kind of cool. That's the Matrix. Right. It is a metaphor of the post-truth era. And the belts are really just a story, from my opinion.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
But they're a valuable story.
Well, hugely valuable, because I'm thinking about wrestling, right? Like there isn't adult wrestling where you get to go like to a wrestling school. Like there's not 10 wrestling schools on PCH.
No.
Where you can roll in as an adult and be like, hey, I'm here to wrestle. And then there's guys that are age.
Guys have tried those too.
17
and they always
to
fail.
80 years old on there doing wrestling, right? And I think the belting, bringing people into categories so you can kind of like judge yourself off of your peers, like you said, it helps more people engage, I think. And I think that's a good thing, right? And it makes this thing a bigger thing and a more badass thing for everybody to do.
Yeah.
It's apparent in the competitions. Like that's one of the coolest things about jiu-jitsu, I think, compared to other activities that I've ever done, is that you can go compete like that, where you can go be the white belt world champion of 30-year-old dudes that are 170 pounds.
Yep.
And you can go for, everyone that's a white belt that's 30 years old and 170 pounds, I'm the man. Like, I think that's a cool thing,
Yeah.
Well, in that comparison to wrestling, I mean, I think the arts are vastly different in why this might attract an older crowd.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
Because as Chris has talked about many times, the explosivity of wrestling and being primarily focused on takedowns and being slammed into the ground constantly, that doesn't have the longevity, I don't believe, as what we do primarily on the ground and technically and with the gi to slow things down and the control. So I think that this is more friendly toward an older crowd.
It's very attribute based. So collegiate and freestyle wrestling is the goal is to hold a person on their back, upper back for 1, 2, 3, pin, the match is over, right? Greco is the same as judo, except you like judo, you have ground component and hold downs and pins, but it's more about who gets that high amplitude throw.
Yeah.
And that has a short shelf life, as does attribute-based, I just got to hold you on your back wrestling. But jiu-jitsu, because of the guard and because of the complexity of it, enables experience to be more important than attributes.
Yeah.
Far more important.
And that's what the belts represent, going back to the belts. They represent that experience.
Well, I'm saying if you plugged belts into wrestling, like
I just don't.
Because I also think the argument you're saying,
it has a short shelf life.
but so does judo, right? but there's a whole range of ages and types of people that do
Yeah.
judo. And I think that's because there's a way to reward studying the art
Yes.
in judo, whereas wrestling
With
doesn't
like
have
kata
that at all. There
and all
isn't
that
like
kind of
a
stuff. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
like you can't show up at a wrestling place and be like, oh, I'm interested in learning these techniques and just learning and being
Yeah,
rewarded
it's
based
never
on your
evolved
It's like,
that way.
duh,
It's
let's
never
just
evolved that
grapple. Let's wrestle.
Yeah. And I think if jiu-jitsu was like that, it does have that unique feature where like has a longer shelf life.
Yes.
But I think the belts help to
absolutely.
engage people like that.
Well, and I think on the ground, we can roll in a way, like, I think that there is a way that we can roll always. You know what I mean?
Yes, all the
like,
way
even
into
if
your
we had to
80s.
bring a walker out here, we could get down the ground and maybe roll around, right?
Yeah.
Like, with a totally destroyed right hip, I can still practice jujitsu in a way that I don't even feel like it's bothering me.
Right. You're done with kickboxing.
I'm not going to kickbox. I don't think I'm going to wrestle.
Yep.
But I can hold a base and stand
Yep.
and
Yep.
play from there a bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not going to be taking shots.
yeah, I mean, personally, I love all the martial arts, including the fantasy or quote unquote fake ones. I love the combat sports, but jiu-jitsu is the one that I even knew when I was young. This for me is the game changer. It favors knowledge and technique over brawn, speed, flexibility, and power. That much what was absolutely clear.
Though those things do help.
But they do help, yes. They clearly help.
But shouldn't be part, like Chris was saying, shouldn't be part of rewarding growth in the art through the belts.
Right. Because then otherwise only athletic 180 to 200 pounders will ever get the black belt.
Right. I think if we decide, okay, belting is a really good thing, it organizes the sport in a way that allows more people to participate, and it motivates people to participate, like you're saying. I think those are good things, but there needs to be some sort of way to check that you are actually being put into a category with your peers correctly.
And now we are opening the philosophy of politics and bureaucracy.
Right.
So martial arts is kind of one of the last and least regulated industries. Mm-hmm. You have to get I remember years back, my sister-in-law hooked me up a job out in one of the big box corporate gyms, and as a personal trainer. And I was starting to work with a guy. I grabbed these mitts and I'm showing him how to box. Management comes over and goes, "You're not authorized. I don't have my boxer size certificate." So I was not licensed to train, nor am I licensed to give a massage or a haircut. But anybody can open up a store and say, "I teach martial arts." It's truly the last unregulated industry.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because who then regulates it? The government, IBJJF, and that opens up that thing that we humans do in all our tribes is we want to control and regulate with good reasons and bad. The good ones are to keep practitioners safe. Martial arts, we need to regulate them and have rules. And if you want to open up a school, you need a license to be able to teach. And then what can you teach? Can you teach boxing? Don't have your license. Can you teach this? You don't have your license. And then it creates this whole cluster fucking bureaucracy of bullshit.
Which some organizations have created on their own their, to regulate it as an entire industry, I think would be kind of impossible.
I was gonna say a cool example is like in judo, right? They have multiple governing bodies. There's small regional governing bodies, and then there's like national governing bodies.
And they have a check and balance.
And international governing bodies. But there's multiple ones of each. There's like an Olympic judo, there's International Judo Federation, there's USA Judo. There's United States Judo Federation. So these different governing bodies are competitors. and what they offer their members are like insurance and guidance for.
Judo's great at that for like $7 a month.
You can be a part of one of these organizations and like you're insured to be on the mat. So they basically also provide like ranking and guidance and all this stuff for like how to rank your students and things like that. So it's kind of neat where there's like multiple organizations doing the same thing. So there's like a little bit of competition happening, like who can provide the most value to people. And instead of just like submitting to like one organization that
And in
that
our
does it
sport,
all.
ultimately, we have one.
That's kind of where we're at, right? Is
Yeah.
we've got the IBJJF basically
IBJJF.
like has their ranking chart.
Which is why I call them fascism, right?
Well,
because they
But-
are definitely the ones in charge.
But
Well,
in that judo system, though, that you're talking about, if there's 3, they all agree on how you get the next rank, though.
Sort of.
there's some small differences, I think, and but it seems like everyone generally kind of like agrees that
Yeah.
like this is roughly how it ends up, you know? And then the funny thing is like you've mentioned before, once things progress to like the Olympic level, like there is no ranks, it doesn't matter. And in the Olympics, they don't walk out and go like,
He's a 5th degree black
fifth
belt.
degree, yeah, they just go,
Earn this diploma and that one.
here's the guy,
Right.
and
Who
here's the
wins?
other guy,
Yeah.
and they're both black belts, right? No
Yep.
one's going to not be a black belt in there.
Yeah.
Which is eventually what jiu-jitsu will
Yes.
probably come to.
You won't have an Olympic blue belt, a jiu-jitsu world champion.
But they have like, for instance, the organization that governs Southern California, they have like pretty extensive guidelines for how to promote people. And some of it is time and grade.
Yep.
Some of it, there's like certain things that you have to do, like
Skill
you have
and
to do a
performance.
kata or something like that. But then they have like categories of people too. Like you can be like a competitor, you can be a really busy competitor, you can be someone that just collects a couple points
A
here and
hobbyist,
there.
yep.
Yep, by competing. And they categorize the practitioners, and then your ranking is like dependent on what you do, which is really good, right? Like you can compete your way to a black belt in judo.
Yes.
And it's like a pretty fast track.
And not ever do a kata.
Yeah,
Yep.
and you can show up, and I think you gotta like if you showed up with a white belt, I think, and like smoked like 6 black belts or something like that, I think they would just go.
When
okay.
I was a purple belt, I was at a judo club on a Navy base, and they entered me as a brown belt in the judo comp. And they were like, "Where's his paperwork and his card?" And the coach like went over and he talked to the other guy, and he said, "Whatever," and I won it. And then I'm like, "Oh, can I have my judo brown belt?" And he said, "No, because you got to go through all these hoops,
all the steps. Yeah.
And I remember like that was like one of the first times having come out of the Jeet Kune Do world, doing Japanese karate and all these other things. I realized how less of a system there was in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu / Brazilian than there is in every other martial art I've tried. There's much more of a regulation of the body. And now we definitely have that in our art as well.
We do in terms of a minimum time, but there's no specifications as to what one should know to receive their blue, purple, brown,
Right.
and black belts.
That's
For
all
IBJJF.
oriented per organization or instructor.
But Jiu-Jitsu Global Federation has like very specific descriptions of the
Yes.
things that you should have learned, you should be thinking about,
Yes.
you should be feeling. Like that's a lot of the language
interesting.
in there.
That's probably new, though, too, relatively. I mean,
a
how
I
lot
mean,
long
of
has
Jiu-Jitsu
it
Global
been
Federation
around?
is a couple years old.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
it's
couple
not that-
years.
That's
And
Hixon's thing.
that's Hixon's thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
But is it Hixon's thing? Because a lot of it is a guy interviewing Hixon, Hixon giving his opinions, and then this guy making
trying
regulation out
to
of it.
organize it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So how?
Because how in charge is Hixon of Jiu-Jitsu Global Federation really?
because when,
no idea.
when I've observed
This guy would know.
Hixon rank, he ranks the way we did in the old school.
Oh, really?
If you're that belt, he knows it.
Yeah.
It's not a test.
No.
But I'm
It
sure it
doesn't know all these moves.
I wonder if
No.
like the description on his in his
JJGF.
federation, if he would of like what he does normally like
Yeah.
complies with that.
He'll agree.
Yeah.
He'll go, "Oh yeah, you can't be a black belt and not know these. Come on."
Yeah.
But it's not like, I mean, I think that was created for Hixon rather than created by Hixon. But it is based on Hixon's opinions
Yeah.
and Hixon's experience
Yeah.
on knowing what Hixon says is a black belt or not.
Yeah, I feel like a bunch of people right now are trying to quantify Hixon or
They are.
get his knowledge and put it in some kind of a box because before he's not around to do it anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Almost
they're trying to
in an unhealthy way.
Yeah. It's a little sycophantic.
Little sycophantic.
For the record. I don't mind being on the record saying that.
Yeah.
Well, and then we also got Gracie Jiu-Jitsu too, which has its own.
And which
thing.
Gracie are we talking about?
Gracie Torrance.
We're talking about
Gracie
Henner and
University.
Hiron's Gracie University.
Let's
Gracie
refer to
University.
that as GU,
Gracie University, right?
Yeah.
Because they have a very specific, like, more display of like technical skills that get you to the next belt.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people whose names we don't even know that have those as well.
Yes.
All around the globe.
Yeah.
There's people who say, this is a very specific way that I'm in a belt test. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from an organization.
Yeah.
And that to me is the beauty of jiu-jitsu, that if you as an instructor want to put something together like that for your specific groups of students, that you can. And if you as an instructor want to be super old school, like Chris was saying, and just feel your students, or like what we do more so now is people vouch for them. They say so-and-so's getting pretty tough. I think he's ready for his next
When
belt.
our black belts are vouching,
then that's kind of how it happens. And it's never once been because some kind of test was performed. And that's the way that we like to do it. And, and like when I'm grading, if I'm in charge of grading somebody, I'm evaluating them every time I roll with them. But then it's like I don't run a school where I'm evaluating 200 people.
Right.
So I think that those
becomes
tests
difficult.
and all that stuff is more about trying to manage larger
large
numbers
group.
of people.
A
Because
large
if there's
tribe.
only 5 people, you don't have to do all that. What's the point?
Yeah.
When you're
And at
trying,
200 people, you can charge them for their belt test, and you can make $100 a pop.
when
It's pretty good.
your tribe gets, like, I don't remember which anthropologist it was, but when a tribe gets larger than a platoon size element, which is like 50 dudes, they've done analysis of police departments and stuff, that there's a critical mass that once it gets larger, where you can't walk in the locker room anymore and know everyone by name and face.
Yeah.
When suddenly there are guys who work the Wednesday shift, which you haven't worked for 3 years, and you have no idea who your fellow cop is out there in the street, who your fellow grappler is on the mat. You have to create different systems to organize. And,
Stripes.
Right, and stripes, and professionalize it, right? Then you have a police academy, whereas in the past, the town elects a sheriff. He builds a posse of a couple of guys who are out of work. He says, hey, I need some work. There's some crooks running around here. Help me out. You're now a deputy. And then it's like, oh, that guy doesn't have the skills. We need an academy. And you create a whole thing. What do we do with all these criminals? We got to create prisons. And it's a machine that feeds itself. And in our industry, when the tribe gets so large, you have to have a spreadsheet to keep track of
I have a
who's
spreadsheet.
which belt, right?
But my spreadsheet has all black belts on it.
That's not what it's
But you
about.
want to know, like, has this guy been a blue belt for 6 months or 6 years?
Yeah.
And the way you can know that is by an automatic time and grade stripe.
Yeah.
Then you can visually see this blue belt has 4 stripes on an old belt, and he's not getting any better. I have to step
How
up
am
my
I
coaching
messing
game.
up?
Yes.
How am I messing up?
That's where it really helps.
Interesting.
That shows that lineage is also super important, right? Because like based on what you just said, it
It
depends
is
on,
and it isn't.
Yeah, I guess if it was super like
Well, like if you had 2 black belts, or let's say you had 2 brown belts from somewhere competing, like then does it matter which school they came from to determine their abilities?
I think the competition would determine their abilities in a competition setting.
But I guess how consistent is a brown belt from here versus like a brown belt on the East Coast?
It's,
just
I
like-
mean,
How wildly different can it be?
That's a thing where, again, because we're so many tribes, that it's hard to even tell. Going back to the analogy of cops, how much is LAPD like NYPD like Scotland Yard in England, right? And now in this globalized world, whether it's jiu-jitsu, law enforcement, or NATO, we can cross-train with each other and get the skills that other agencies, other academies, other military units have and share. And then we ask again, the why.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of it? Like, I understand NATO's purpose. I understand cops. With jiu-jitsu, I'm not sure I understand what is the purpose. Is it so we can legitimately tell who is the black belt world champion?
Well, so like to John's point, if there's a school that's isolated somewhere and doesn't have a lot of interaction with others, and maybe they start grading their people super early,
Yes.
and then they send their, let's say, brown belt out somewhere, and the brown belt just gets smoked because the brown belt's not used to competing with all these different styles and different people because they're isolated somewhere with just the same game and the same instructor and whatever. Even with internet exposure, it's who you're rolling with and how they're perfecting their skills that's really going to help you get better, 100%. I think, is your group. So as a person who I feel came up in a relatively isolated way, with my people that I roll with on the mat being much larger, male gender, etc., I felt that competition was the way that helped me go through the belts a lot faster.
You can gain that healthy exposure.
Exactly, because I would go out and I would see, is this actually working against my peer group or not, which is competitive young blue belt, competitive young purple belt. And by doing that, when I would lose, which was a lot, I would come back and I would work on those things so that the next time I went out and competed, I did better. And then I would start to win, So I think that it's absolutely true that there's not just a standard with blue belts. They're going to all be like the same level. It's varying depending on their environment.
I'm just wondering now, like, do we need a governing body? Does that even important?
That's
I don't
the whole
think so.
thing,
I
right?
think it's just a journey.
I'm a bit more anarchistic in that sense.
I absolutely think so.
It's
and
more
I
fun
think,
without it.
Yeah, no, it's way more fun. And it's like the experience. If I'm a new blue belt and I'm going out and competing and getting smoked, then I'm going to figure it out before I get to the next level, right?
Or you won't want that purple belt.
Yeah, or I won't want the purple belt, being a competitor. And and I don't really know, it wasn't ever my experience to not be a competitor when I was going through the belts and learning jiu-jitsu. But so I can't really speak for how that applies to somebody who's not. I just know as a coach that I have certain standards. And I want to hold those standards, and it's nothing too crazy. I don't think people should have to know 8,000 different techniques to get their next belt. I don't think it's about knowledge. I think it's about performance. Do you have something you can do well?
Not be just knocked over and have a guard that's hard to pass. Right? I mean, that's some clear standards.
And then are there passes that you're attempting to do?
Yes.
Are there submissions
Can
you're
you pass
attempting
a
to
guard?
do? And then it just keeps progressing. Like at purple belt, we've always talked about that being the phase where you own your own game.
Yes.
These are the techniques that this person is trying to chain together. And we see the blue belt become a purple belt when they start to really own technical aspects and putting together, you can tell these are the types of passes that this person likes to do. This is the type of submissions. This is the style of guard that they're playing. And that's ever expanding, but they're picking something that they're starting to get good at.
And it's when you become a grappler. The purple belts start to even look like grapplers. They start to walk like grapplers. Their ears might get screwed up. Their body posture. But
their necks are thicker.
You can't spot a white belt bouncing in the room happy, but you can spot the purple belt walk.
Crawling through the room injured.
Yeah. And it's the advanced amateur phase where sometimes purple belts perform like black belts, but then under pressure they fold like white belts.
Right.
And that's the journey through purple belt to get to a brown belt, which for me is like you've made it. All you got to do is not fuck up and you'll end up a black belt. But the purple belt, you got to fucking earn it. And the brown belt, you got to earn it.
So that makes it kind of hard when we have students that come to us say as a brown belt, and they didn't go through what we would have had them go through as a purple belt. Then we have to allow them to go through that as a brown belt. So, so we can stay to our standards.
Yep.
We want to keep our standards, though I think that our standards have shifted over time. Maybe when I met Chris, he was a lot harder on belts. I think he was.
I think I was,
And
because
maybe
I was
he was
younger, tougher, and more competitive.
He was younger, tougher, and more competitive, and would beat people up and stuff like that, and want them to be able to hold their own against his younger, tougher self.
Yeah, I kind of wanted...
And he told us we all had to compete.
Yes.
We had to compete.
At least
It
once
wasn't even
per
a
belt.
choice.
You don't have to win.
People
but you have
left
to
over
compete.
that.
Yeah.
People left us over
Yes.
that
Oh, wow.
competition thing that he wanted people to do.
Not because I want you to win, but because competing is, I think, a necessary and good experience to face your fears and demons and to get past mental walls. By signing up and having no idea who you get but to fight, no idea, no control. You're controlled by the tournament, by the organization, by the fate of time, right? And I think that spiritually is a good experience for all black belts to have had.
But we don't say that anymore.
We don't.
We don't. For whatever reason. Maybe because we don't compete anymore. We retired.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I urge
think
you to.
when we were out there competing, it was like everybody had to do it.
Yeah.
And then some people were like, no, don't want to do it. I'm out, you know?
Yep.
But now we're not doing that anymore, so.
And I've thought, well, God, why should I think people have to when they're here because they love the art? They like rolling around, which is competition under no pressure.
And we're not that into masters people.
Yes, I'm
like,
not into all that.
Especially over, like, once you're super banged up.
Yeah. When you're an injured mess.
When you're an injured mess, do you really have to put yourself through that anymore? I'm not going to.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect anybody else to do it either, unless it was something that they really felt called to do.
Well, see, and now I'm thinking you guys have developed your standards, but this is through like a huge, deep amount of experience in jiu-jitsu, right? So
Adaptable
without a governing
standards.
body, how do the standards, like, what do you want to see out of, like,
By the time one reaches black belt, they have gone through the experience. When they're able to promote other people. And I believe that only black belts should give belts out. I don't really agree with colored belts giving out belts, because like you just said, it's the experience and also you rely on your mentors. So people who are black belts under us can come to us and say, hey, what do you think I should do about this? I have this student and I want them to achieve X, Y, Z. And do you agree? Do you disagree? And we can just share our experience. So we're mentors for people.
But I feel like I've seen a lot of people get, like, just out in jiu-jitsu in general, I've seen people get excited and want to, you know.
Do it too early?
They want to promote people under them, and they want
Because,
to do these things.
I mean,
Or for their business, they might
or
want
their business.
uh,
And
I'm
it's a
saying
power
that-
trip. It's a power trip
more
knowing
colored
that
belts.
you are controlling someone's
That's what I've seen.
next rank.
Yeah, I've seen that happening.
I've seen the power trip.
And
yeah, I've been guilty of that.
and
What? You didn't get your belt from me? I thought I was giving you your belt. I get my little feelings hurt, my little
no.
ego destroyed.
no, not like that. I'm
Well,
saying,
it's
like,
true.
I've seen people that seem like they're kind of getting that makes them feel good to promote people, so they're like trying to do it, you know.
Yes.
And I think a governing body helps with both of those things, right? It keeps
think
people
it
from
does.
doing that, and it also keeps the standard alive.
And then all the
longer.
weight isn't on you.
Right.
Then you have, and that's why us humans naturally like hierarchies,
Yeah.
right? It's why falling into a hierarchy is a very natural thing.
Yeah.
Well, we have the IBJJF standards for time and grade, and
Yeah.
I think, like, for me, I think that's enough. I wouldn't be into, like, writing to someone, I'm thinking about giving out a blue belt. What else do I need to do,
Yeah.
like, to prove that the person did that? I just think that would just be way too much.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be into it at all.
That's how it is.
I'm
in the,
0% into it.
in the judo, your promotion comes through the.
Yeah.
So, like, my judo instructor can't just hand me a belt.
No.
We
He
have to
recommends you.
he recommends me to the board, and then the board has to look at all my
I
stuff.
like doing that within combat base. People recommend, and then we promote.
Yeah, that's
and
good.
if they're already black belts, then they can promote. Not until they're second degree black belts, then they can give out black belts.
Yeah.
Those are standards and guidelines that I like to adhere to within our organization.
Yep.
But we are the leaders of our organization. This is our organization.
Yeah.
And we generally...
That we like to make inclusive of everyone. It's not all about us.
Although we generally follow IBJJF, as does Hixon,
Yeah.
as do the Machados, as does Joe Moreira.
But some
of
people
them have
don't,
their
right?
own little things, whereas like GU, I think, gives their black belts stripes every 2 years.
Oh, I don't know.
All I know is I know guys who have a lot more stripes than the time that they've been in, who are mentored by some pretty big names out there.
Yeah.
And like I get texts, hey, why does so-and-so get their 5th stripe? They were a blue belt when you were a black belt.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I don't know, and I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if you give them a red belt.
Yeah.
Because to me, it really doesn't matter. And getting all hung up into what fucking belts you are, who gave you your stripe, do you have the right stripes, when are you going to get your corral belt? Not like,
He's not that tied into it, but at the same time, just
gotta
to be
do it a little
completely
bit.
honest,
Yeah.
if people could just put stripes on their own belts, then they don't need us anymore.
That's right.
But then also, like, we're offering mentorship. Some people don't take us up on it, and some people do. And that's why, like, I hope to continue to grow as an organization of mentors where we can truly mentor the people who we are giving stripes to. And Chris does go out and do his seminars and have lunches and do stuff. But I want to create more connection among our members. And we're brainstorming and coming up with different ideas on how we can do that.
And again, like, I'm not saying I'll be unhappy when I'm awarded a corral belt. I'll be happy.
But you don't want it early.
But I don't want it early. I don't want
You're
it...
not like drooling, like,
Right.
corral belt, must have.
Right. And as Hixon so eloquently turned down Horion's red belt, and he said, I don't want to jump the line.
Yeah.
Why should I be more important than somebody who doesn't have a huge name, who's put in the same amount of work,
But
right?
at the same time,
honorable,
Justin Williams is one of our black belts with combat base. He came through the other day, and he has done the time to receive his 4th degree. And he didn't necessarily want to get it right then. He wasn't expecting it, but we're like, no, your time is up. It's time to get
Because
your
he got his
4th
third
degree.
late,
Because
so
he
he
got
thought
his
it
third
was
late.
from time
but we
3rd
don't
to 4th.
do that way. Because COVID, you're not going to say,
Yeah.
oh, COVID, so you got your 3rd a little later, whatever it was, right?
You lost 2 years because of COVID.
But they were still training. We were
Yeah.
still training. Everybody was still training. It was just in little pods and stuff like that.
Oh, so and then the governing body has to go, sorry, your paperwork wasn't in.
Yeah,
Right.
screw
So
that.
now-
That's
so-
what IBJJF does
Yeah.
about if you want to
I know someone who that has happened to recently.
I know
Yeah.
several people who that has happened to. Yeah.
GTFOH. This is not...
And that is one of those things. I know guys who have competed in black belt since 20 years ago, who have pictures of them, who you can look them on the website and see, but because they didn't do the paperwork in time,
Yeah.
they don't get their stripe.
Or they don't get it
interesting.
recognized
Or-
by the IBJJF, but they can wear it on their belt, and
Yep.
we can say, or whoever their coaches can say, yes, you are whatever degree you're supposed to be.
Right.
And I don't know.
And that opens up that whole can of, are you legitimate?
Because IBJJF wants you to pay at the appropriate time for every degree every year.
Right.
They don't want to miss out on that revenue. And for us, it's not as much about revenue, though that is a part of having an organization because there's a need and we're fulfilling a need and thus we whatever. But we also want to have our students be able to receive their ranks when they're due.
Yeah.
And I'll ask
Not
everyone
because
out
of
there,
bureaucracy and paperwork.
Yeah.
do you feel legitimate? And if not, is it because an organization has not recognized you as such? Then you have the whole thing about we all have the inner fraud. Part of us all feels like we're kind of a fraud. right? The imposter syndrome, which is something that in the internet, I remember 10 years ago, it started popping up all over. Like, I got a black belt, but I don't feel like a black belt.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to feel like a black belt, go compete at black belt.
Yeah.
Because then, especially if you win, you'll feel like one. If you have a close match, you will feel like one.
Or just keep training, because
Or just
by
keep training,
the time,
yeah.
like, I mean, I was thinking about it. I guess I'm going to be this year a black belt for 13 years. Like, I've been training all this time. Like, why wouldn't I feel like one?
Yeah.
Like, that would be absurd.
But there are those who have weird feelings about their
Then maybe
ring.
they need therapy.
That's what I was
They have
telling
weird
myself.
feelings about everything. Yeah.
It's time for therapy, and I do that too.
When I
love
first-
my therapist.
When I first was given a black belt by you, and I had those thoughts, like those imposter syndrome thoughts, I would just tell myself, like, well, you're not going to stop training, so, like,
Yeah, eventually it'll fit.
yeah, whatever.
It's very common.
You'll
It's
catch
like,
up.
Yeah,
Very
eventually, yeah.
common whenever
It's like,
you get the new belt to
Yeah.
feel a little bit like, oh, until you grow into it. I
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
necessarily feel that when I got my black belt, because I had already competed and won against black belts
yeah,
as a
that's
brown
cool.
belt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought I deserved it.
Yeah.
I definitely felt at the time that I got black belt that I trained with a lot of people that I thought were really good black belts, and I felt like I was doing fine.
Yeah.
And
good.
then, like, yeah. The cool thing for me is I was actually training at Gracie University as a guest, as a brown belt. And then I got belted black belt while doing that. So, like, I felt like I was going there and training and sort of gauging how that was, and then gauging that as a black belt too. And it's just kind of a cool, like, it's such an insulated hub, I feel like, in a way. It's a big hub, but it's
a big
insulated.
hub, but it's insulated, yeah.
And then to get to check my skills and knowledge against that is an interesting thing to be able to do. And then, yeah, I don't know. I thought that was a cool, I don't know if it's test, but just like comparison for myself and my skills and where I'm at through that process going brown to black. I thought that was neat.
And there's a broad spectrum and range of skill levels within each belt. And some say black belt is the biggest one.
Well, it has to be,
But I
right?
don't know.
It's the most
Yeah.
years as a black belt, right?
Yeah.
The most years, yeah.
A lot of years.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's been a lot of years, and it's not like you're always growing, right?
No.
It's like sometimes you're
Sometimes you're
sucking
even
way.
dipping,
You're
yeah.
dipping a lot. You're dipping, and then you're having to figure out how to work around different things that happen to your body, or happen
Yep.
emotionally, or happen
Yep.
in your family life, or you're having to adjust so much over this vast amount of time that you are a black belt
Yeah.
through decades of life.
Yeah.
I was 31 or 32 when I got my black belt, and now I'm 45. Like,
Yeah.
So
you too. You're 59. Shoot.
Jesus.
I feel kind of like in conclusion, like a lot of things that we've discussed here on this podcast, that like it's all good.
Yep.
A little bit of governing body is good. And then a little bit of the way you guys roll is good. It's kind of like you got to have everything, right?
Own
All
the
together.
middle.
It's all good. And
Maintain the middle.
but I think what's important to recognize is the people like you guys that have been in jiu-jitsu for a really long time and have the deepest understanding of the whole art and the whole thing, you know? And you guys need to be recognized as an authority, I think, in that whole thing. I think
In
it's
one sense, I
important.
agree, but I think also with all those years of experience, you realize how little you actually know about what should be.
Well,
the right
So
way,
people should be
right?
looking at you and hearing that
Yes.
and
I don't feel that
taking
it's
that
authority.
as a lesson.
Yeah, I like to
Recognition
help
or like recognize.
mentor or advise, or, you know, I think that each person should be able to make their own decisions, but should ask for help if
Yeah.
you know, if they're stumbling across something, because we certainly will ask each other.
Yeah.
Or like, say there's one guy that we're looking at for their black belt. We have a text with 3 of us discussing what that person needs, what we want to see from them. And I feel like all 3 of us should be like, yes, before it's a yes, right? So, and I know other groups, a group that I'm of ours that's out in Wisconsin, I know they have several black belts and they all get together and meet and discuss before they make a decision. So it's not just like one person is just running around like, promoting based on like,
Yeah, but
know?
having that consultation is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
people need to know that you guys are there for consultation. They need to know that there are other people like you out there to consult about like, what does this mean? What are we doing? Does this all make sense?
Yeah.
Instead of people just going like, oh, some guy gave me a black belt somewhere, so I'm going to go ahead and do my thing now. And now like whatever this guy's doing is like way derivative of the whole thing.
That's why I think it's important though that we have relationships with a mentor. Like Chris has Hixon is a mentor, and he has us to collaborate with. And somebody's just like all on their own. I think it would. I don't know. I think it would be hard, but not that I'm against that.
And that brings back in why you have a system, an institution.
Yeah.
So it doesn't change so much by the time the fifth generation's out. It looks nothing like the original.
Right.
And that's the good argument for conservatism.
Yeah.
Conservatism protects tradition and institution, whereas progressivism, liberalism challenges institution. And in my opinion, as a Hegelian Taoist, it's writing that balance of finding the good parts of both of those and the bad parts and the pitfalls. Because every philosophy, every governing body, every system has a fatal flaw. And because, and in my opinion, as a philosopher, there are structural reasons in the way the human being thinks why there is inevitably a fatal flaw within every idea. And as soon as you think, oh, I found the idea, I found the answer, it's laissez-faire capitalism, it's Marxism, it's representative democracy, whatever it is, each of those things has a flaw. And by recognizing a flaw, you could do what we do in Jiu-Jitsu, which is adapt and own the middle.
But what does that mean? Just kidding.
Well, that's good. I think that's a good discussion on belts. I mean, I think we tackled a lot of stuff there, right?
We definitely didn't hit what our personal things
we could
we're
say a lot
looking
more
for
on
in
that,
each belt.
but
We
maybe
can
we
hit
don't
that
need to.
another one,
Maybe we could do exact ranks because we're using a lot of time, and there's a question off the internet that I really wanted to.
All right,
let's go
let's
for it.
answer a question.
Okay, so there was no, I lost it in my notes. So at Throwzilla was this guy's handle.
Throw it.
So he was listening to, I think, a short that we cut where you're talking about art, street, and sport. And he's saying, what is the truth that art gives? So you mentioned when you're saying like you practice with the art mindset. What truth does that give? Or you're saying you get the truth from practicing the art. And his question was, what is that truth?
I might have messed it up when he heard that, or I haven't heard it right, but I always say we think street because that's honesty. The honest reason is life or death shit. I don't want to believe in some hokey-pokey magic move and get killed. So, in essence, truth comes from the balancing of all three. Whereas art is exploration, risk. Because in the sport or in the street, I have to be very concerned if I lose. Whereas when I practice the art, I'm not concerned if I win or lose. Therefore, I can experiment. I can eliminate attributes. And I can grow. So art is growth and risk. Competition or sport is where you're taking that art, you're putting it in man-made rules of a game, and you're applying all your attributes. It becomes, you can go down the athletic rabbit hole. Because being able to do 1,000 crunches, the splits, is going to help you more than learning 3 more kinds of arm bars, right? And that becomes then more weighted on the body knowledge balance. But then what keeps the thing honest, the truth of it is, why are we in this? What is the primal reasons again? And for me, the primal reason for martial arts, military arts, is to vanquish or survive in combat over life or limb.
Mm-hmm.
That's the grounding aspect of it. And the floaty aspect of it is the art. And the balancing, let's test this, but we have to add some rules, otherwise we're going to kick each other in the groin.
You're going to kill each other
eyes
because
out.
you said life or limb.
Right.
You can't kill each other.
So we have
when
to
we're
make
practicing.
a sport. And that sport also preserves the art. But judo has rules to preserve the upright throw.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're not punching each other, we're going to bend down and stiff arm away.
Mm-hmm.
But if we do that, we lose the art of judo. The art of judo is lost. So in the sport, we create rules to preserve both the art and the street aspect of it.
Mm.
So the sport is the rules part. The street is the absence of all rules part. And the art is not worrying about winning or losing, but worrying about creative expression. That's how I look at it.
I answered his question on the
Yeah.
chat, and I was thinking that the truth that art gives is that basically when you're practicing with like an art mindset, you kind of get the chance to like break down what you're doing when going full speed. Because you know, like when you're in the moment and you're like doing something right, you might not really fully understand what you're doing.
You're not even aware,
until you like slow down enough and sort of take like an artistic approach to it, where you're like, oh, this is actually what I'm doing, and if I did this a little better like that, and like so that actually like brings the truth to your understanding of what you're doing. Like you might think you do something super awesome and or think you might do some certain thing, but you can't explain how you did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like practicing with an art mindset gives you the opportunity to find truth in what you're doing, as far as like understanding exactly what you're doing and then adapting that and allowing it to grow.
Yeah.
That was my thought on
And
it.
it's like if a person walks in and goes, I have no interest in sport, competition, all that. I want to learn street self-defense. My honest answer is, well, then competing in the sport will really help you a lot.
Oh, for sure.
The same thing as if they say, I have no interest in this street stuff. I think it's absurd. I want to compete. I wrestled in high school, blah, blah. I'm going to say, well, it'll help you to think street so you're aware of my hands and my head, otherwise, which you won't, and you'll find it improves your sport. And if you really want to improve them both, abandon all attributes and all goals, and your only goal is to explore and get more technical. That's the art.
I have a little like insight or feeling about it. Sometimes part of the art for me is completely abandoning any thought process and not like what you were talking about. Like part of the art for me is like being in the moment, like completely being in the moment so much that my body is just moving and my brain isn't thinking.
Yeah.
So I'm not, even if it's slow, whatever it is, that it's just a complete like body experience. That's one of my favorite parts about jiu-jitsu, because I don't want to think about how I'm breaking the move down. I want to just feel my body moving. That's how I mostly roll.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice. Those are good answers. So one more cue. All right.
Yeah.
So this guy at Chad Elliott Fallman, who has had a bunch of comments, which are awesome. We appreciate.
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. He says, do you believe that Hixon's philosophy of stopping opponents in back mount still applies to modern MMA?
What does that even mean?
I'm not even sure exactly. I would have
Stopping
to actually
opponents?
see the position.
I think he was thinking about back mount, like person belly down and you're mounted on top of them.
That's a back mount. Yep.
Yeah, and I thought Hixon really liked to do in MMA was like the gift wrap from like
gift wrap. Yep.
From like technical mount or whatever. Is that what you call it, technical mount?
No, I don't. I call it front mount, side mount, back mount.
So side mount, I guess.
And what some people call cross sides, like
Some
GU
people
calls
call
that side
side
mount.
mount.
Yes.
Hixon calls it cross sides.
Okay.
Machado's
Side
called
control.
it cross sides.
Who calls it
called
side control?
I call it that because side control is the wrestler's version. Cross sides, the jiu-jitsu, Keisugatami's the judo version.
I just call it all side control.
Well, yeah, probably. It's all terminology, right?
Yeah.
But ultimately, if I am mounted on you, it means you're on bottom and my legs are around you.
Yeah.
And if you are on your side, I'm side mounted you.
Yeah.
If you're on your back, I'm front mounting you because you're fronting me. And if you roll over on your stomach, I've mounted your back, a back mount.
But what's the part about stopping? Stopping what?
Like, I think he's saying like Hixon likes to stop people. Like he likes to work towards back mount maybe and then like finish people right there.
Yeah, what's wrong with that? That's the best position you could be in.
I think the only
back mount.
Yeah. So I think it does
front mount. It beats side mount.
It does still apply. I mean, people do it, right?
I think so.
I was gonna say like I think Nate Diaz choked out Connor from that position, got him to squirm onto his belly and clacked him in the face from the top and got him from the back.
Yep, on the back.
And but I thought Hixon really liked that side mount position with the
he
gift
likes
wrap.
it too.
Yeah.
I think he likes all of it.
I think
He likes to be on
Hixon
top.
likes all of it.
He likes to be on top.
He likes jujitsu.
The only thing I would say for
jujitsu.
MMA is that it might be difficult to get a modern MMA guy to go belly down like that.
You just said Connor went belly down. Is he modern?
Yeah, I don't know.
Kinda.
No?
I don't know.
I mean,
He's not
now
he's old now.
Nate got him to go belly down. Yes, I don't know.
And now we're opening a
Nate
can
Dogg?
of worms and we're analyzing man-made rules again. The man-made rules of modern MMA, which include timed rounds, not being able to hit a guy with knees on the mat, not hitting on the back of the neck, no headbutts, wearing gloves. So we've already changed it from the original, the Valley Tudo.
Right.
Right? And then when we think street, most of the time we're wearing cloth. So then that re-intros the value of cloth-based jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So all of these things, again, have a fatal flaw.
Yeah.
There's no single answer, single art that you get that's going to answer all the questions. But the closest is jiu-jitsu.
All right. Chad, there you go.
Thanks, Chad. And you feel free to ask us more questions,
Yeah.
Chad. You can email podcast at combatbase.com.
Yeah.
Podcast at combatbase.com and ask us more questions. We love it.
We do love it. It's
we do
cool.
love it.
Pound, like, and subscribe.